Hello, and welcome to the sixth episode of Trash Talk Every Frame a Dumpster Fire. I'm TK, and as always, I'm joined by my co host Eric.
Hello there.
And this week, we're joined by our special guest, Salad.
Hello, I am Salad.
Salad.
Hello,
Hi.
Salad.
Hello, Eric.
Yeah, we're joined by Selena, and this week we have watched the movie Hellboy.
Yeah.
It's a movie.
It is a movie, and it comes at a very special time when comic book and superhero movies were really just getting off the ground. You had some successes in the 70s and 80s with like the Tim Burton Batman movies, the superhero or Superman movies, but in general, like they weren't really well respected until or really like successful until the late 90s, early 2000s. You got like Blade in 1998, which was one of the earlier Marvel successes, and that movie did very well with audiences and critics. You get the first X Men movie in 2000, which was like a smash hit, and then that franchise really just got the engine turning. Then you got like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies that started, I think, in 2002, and this comes at 2004, sort of just as things are getting going for that juggernaut. So, what did you guys think of Hellboy?
Hellboy did did my favorite thing in any movie or TV show ever, where they acknowledge that there is a real world link, or pretend that there is a real world link, or hint to it, and then use that. They incorporate that into the story as a way of covering up the thing they're hiding. So in Stargate, they made a show that was basically Stargate the show, but in the show called Wormhole X, I think. In this, they point out that there are Hellboy comics that are made about actual Hellboy in the movie, made about the Hellboy comic,
Yeah, it has that weird sort of meta element to it. Like this character has his own mythology in the universe that he's in.
which is actually just the comics that the universe comes from. Yeah.
I will say it's a lot worse than what I remember.
Really?
How so?
I was remembering it as like this great superhero. Hellboy is like the best ever, and he was crime fighting and just amazing, and he's just a guy with a gun and a big
Mm-hmm.
fist.
He's just a
Mm-hmm.
schlub trying to
I,
do his best.
Yeah, he
um,
wasn't that great, to be honest with you.
that's why I like it, because it's not, it's just, I. So there's kind of a concept that has come up in a few different movies, and the really easy example is you've got Han Solo in Star Wars. Han Solo in Star Wars is basically there to be the audience, making fun of the ridiculousness of everything around him,
Yeah,
and he
yeah.
does it really well. Hellboy kind of does that too.
He has
Like
that
you've got
same kind of irreverence, yeah.
and I'm bad with names, but the FBI agent that shows up at the start of the movie, the new guy,
John
same
Myers.
thing.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, same thing, but a little bit different. Like Hellboy is just the straight man. Nothing phases him. This is all
Hmm.
just, he's not freaking out. He's just like whatever. And then you've got John or whatever,
Well,
who's there to
continuing
like.
your the Star Wars comparison, John Myers is young Luke, except Luke isn't really the focus of this movie. Luke's the sort of the young preppy kid who's pretty ignorant of the world, and he's just sort of being launched on this grand adventure. And then you get characters like Han Solo, who have been in this magical world for a while and sort of help show him the ropes. But it's sort of reversed. Hellboy is sort of if you followed Han Solo as the main character, and Luke is just sort of along for the ride rather than really directing too much of the plot or the happenings. So I think that's kind of interesting.
Hmm.
But
That is.
before we get too much into that sort of stuff, what is Hellboy about?
A boy from hell.
Excellent.
Literally.
Moving on.
I think that actually I rewatched it last night just to be extra ready. Thank you, dog. And I took notes as always. I have 2 notes. My only 2 notes are Rasputin and Lovecraftian.
Yes.
That's it. Those are the only. But
Good notes.
movie opens up in 1940 something.
1944.
44.
Mhm.
I was gonna say either 44 or 47. Great. I probably should have written that in my notes. Opens up there on an island off the coast of Scotland where the American Army or Navy, or I don't know if they're Navy SEALs, whatever, are sort of storming this island where they believe there are Nazis
Mhm.
prepping to do some sort of occult something.
Yeah, there's this like alternate history component. Like historically, like, in our world, the Nazis were big into like the occult and weird um like occult stuff. Like Hitler was obsessed with this stuff. They were
Mhm.
big into science and the occult and trying to blend these things. It's actually really weird. But, in this Hellboy universe, the occult stuff is actually real. There are magical artifacts, alternate dimensions, weird, demons from hell. And, on this Scottish island, they're conducting this ritual to bring forth these, you know gods of chaos to, help the Nazis win
They
the
are
war or wipe out the planet, something like that.
summoning Cthulhu,
They are
basically.
summoning Cthulhu. Exactly.
Literally, yes. Hitler wanted the 7 gods of chaos to kill all of his enemies, from what they were saying. And I mean, it kind of worked. He brought some back.
You got one small red ape.
So what I always wondered is, where did the blue guy come from?
Abe Sapien, yeah.
He just they don't
I-
really explain it.
they
Like
don't
they
really
just say he would,
explain, no. He's just been around since the 1700s, I guess.
He's just there.
and we won't get too much into it because we didn't ask Selena to also watch the second movie, but if you get into the second movie, they go more into the fact that, like, yes, there's the chaos gods and that's sort of Hellboy's origin story, but this universe that they're building has all sorts of other mythos in it. So there's
Fairy tale
elves,
creatures,
then yeah.
Arthurian legend, all that sort of stuff is sort of real and
So
exists in this universe.
for all we know, Abe Sapien could be the last descendant of the Atlanteans after the city sank or something, right?
Mhm.
Like, who knows? All they say is they found him in the basement of a hospital,
Oh,
and he's a little psychic.
Mhm. But yeah,
interesting.
after
Okay.
everything goes wrong on the sort of Scottish island as the sort of Americans fend off the Nazis there, we find one of our main characters who's telling us this story. John Hurt, who plays Dr. Broom, and he's sort of reflecting on how he met Hellboy and took him in as his son, and then we flash forward to 60 years later, where he basically works as this paranormal crime fighter. I guess it's sort of up to Hellboy and the rest of the paranormally gifted group to stop all these demons and magic users from wreaking havoc on the human world.
Yes, and basically, what we find out from the summoning scene is there's these uber Nazis trying to do bad stuff, aided by the best character in any movie he's ever in, Rasputin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they do the summoning ceremony, the portal opens, the Americans intervene, they try and stop them. Professor throws a grenade at the portal, all that. Rasputin gets sucked into the portal, and then when we jump 60 years into the future, I think shortly after that, like, we jump into the future with the John and the new FBI agent figuring out what the heck is going on at this paranormal activity branch of the government.
It's almost like a Men in Black type moment where Will Smith's
Yes.
character is introduced to this secret agency and all the shenanigans going on.
That
I think
actually,
he handled it pretty well.
yeah. I mean, that's probably, yeah. Professor chose him, I'm guessing, because he assumed he could. He's very open-minded.
Yeah, pretty level-headed.
That was one of my favorite parts of the movie. Both every time I've seen it, or at least the times I can remember. Because the first time I saw it, I was probably way younger than I should have been. I don't remember it very well, but the last couple times I watched, that's one of my favorite little sort of jokes. Is they show the head of the FBI on, you know, a late night talk show talking about Hellboy's not real, aliens aren't real. Why is every picture of every Hellboy alien, you know, whatever, why are they always out of focus, all that. And then he outright says there is no branch of the government called the Center for Paranormal Activity Defense and Research or something like that. Again, I'm bad with memory, but and then we immediately cut to that. They cut to the building that is in, and it tells you you're at the Center for
And the
Paranormal
exact
Research.
name, yeah, just fades in on the
Yeah.
screen. It's perfect.
Like, but the thing that I was trying to get to is after we get a little bit of an introduction to what's going on, we do get a little bit of a slight flashback to what's been happening in parallel with this, which is Rasputin's creepy girlfriend that he gave immortality murders a guide somewhere in some icy place to raise Rasputin from the dead, to bring him back from the Chaos Realm, however that
Yeah.
works.
That whole process isn't exactly explained how that happens. So if you're not on board with the movie by then, you're not going to be on board for anything else that happens afterwards. Like the weird occult mysticism stuff is
Yeah, you
like
just accept it.
has its own rules.
And I think they do a good job of telling you, like, everything you think is, if you're a normal, that's not the right word. Forget I said normal. If you are the average person who doesn't believe in much of the occult things, whatever you do happen to believe in, everything you've ever heard is true. Tarot cards are completely true. The Loch Ness Monster is real. Aliens probably exist. Catholicism is real. Christianity is real. All these other religions play their roles in this. And we get sort of shown that we see the professor at the Center for Oncology, which is the center for cancer patients at the hospital, and we find out with him that he has about 6 weeks to live because he's got metastasized cancer. And they say to him, well, you can always get a second opinion. Well, he already has, because we see him flipping over the tarot card, and it's, I don't know the names of the cards, but the Grim Reaper, essentially, and that is his second opinion. He knows there's nothing that can be done, and that's why he's bringing in our Luke Skywalker, as Eric said, sort
Training
of to
him.
be his replacement as the grounding force and the guide for Hellboy as he grows up.
And that, I think, leads us to some of the funnest parts of this movie is just Hellboy interacting with the rest of the cast.
Yes.
Having that sort of Han Solo type character be irreverent, but, you know, the rogue with a heart of gold type character. Hellboy is just trying to do the right thing, but he's also, you know, he's sort of, you know, there's some selfishness there, there's some childishness there, and that leads to a lot of the sort of fun character conflicts. Because this movie has, you know, has the romantic element, has the action adventure, and has weird Nazi mysticism. It has everything.
Can we just, like, somebody please make me a version of this movie without the weird 13-year-old jealousy romance bullshit? Like, the whole thing of John and Hellboy's girlfriend, like, go out for coffee, and then Hellboy breaks through a brick wall to go follow them and, like, spy on them and be all jealous about it and stuff. I get that that's, like, sort of trying to show us that despite the fact that he's over 60 years old, because of the way he ages, Hellboy's still fairly, in his soul and in his personality, still pretty young and immature.
Yeah, in rewatching the film, that's the stuff that really didn't hold up to me. I forgot how boring
Yeah.
and unconvincing a lot of the romance stuff is in this movie. But
Oh yeah.
that's not the interesting stuff for me. Um, I the makeup and special effects I think really deserve special mention for this movie. One of the
Yes.
main sort of forces of nature would be Samael, the Hound of Resurrection, who we were introduced to very early, who's this weird like demonic dog thing with tentacles all over its face and four eyes. It's a really fun design. The creature goes from like a all fours stance to a bipedal stance. Does some really good mixing of like CGI and practical, because it's a dude in a rubber suit until you have to have like the CGI model for more physically impossible type stunts.
Yeah, I mean, I rewatched it today and I was expecting the CGI to be absolute, just horrible. You can tell exactly what it is, and you can at sometimes, but
Oh yeah.
I was very surprised. It is really good. I was mainly surprised about the red on Hellboy. Like he gets rained on, it doesn't wash off. It looks basically like his skin. Like it was really good.
Yeah, hats
Yeah,
off
and
to the
especially
makeup
with
department.
the makeup for these movies is legendary. The second movie was nominated for an Oscar for its makeup and special effects.
It deserves it. It
Yeah,
was really good.
the work on Hellboy and Abe Sapien is phenomenal. It's this combination of like prosthetic suits and crazy makeup, and Ron Perlman just absolutely sells it.
Um yeah, I feel like you get in this sort of time frame in human history, I make that very grand, but in this sort of era of movie making, you get one of two, because we sort of talked about, and this movie is later than some of the examples I have, I think, but like in the past, not on the podcast, but we've talked about the Matrix movies and how I felt that the battle for Zion in the later Matrix movies was very much a masterpiece of combining VFX and practical effects
Oh yeah.
and it going perfectly. And I think in this, yeah, you can see a lot of people think of this era as the era of VFX are just like computer generated effects are just starting to become a thing and they're absolute garbage. And the only fucking reason that everybody thinks they're that shit is because of George fucking Lucas. Everybody thinks of the Star Wars prequels with their shitty VFX, and there's a lot of really good practical effects in the prequels too, but all people think of is the shitty VFX.
Some
But
of the
if you
digital
look
effects are excellent and groundbreaking. Some of them still hold up, but yeah, a lot of the stuff is like just obvious green screen.
and
You're
I
right.
think if you show people, some of the Matrix, you show them this movie, you can change people's minds about what VFX. I think actually it gets a little bit worse before it gets better going forward, especially in sort of the superhero space. I'm sure there are some of the Marvel movies where the VFX wasn't quite there yet, but they really lean heavily on it. This is an era where everything looks really good because they know the limitations of both practical and computer effects, and they do a really good job of mixing them.
You hit the nail on the head, I think, and Guillermo del Toro, the director of this film, specializes in that. A film like Pan's Labyrinth is so good, largely because of how well it combines practical and digital effects. And yeah, understands the limitations of both those mediums. And a connection to Pan's Labyrinth are our actor for Abe Sapien, Doug Jones, also does the Fawn and the Pale Man in that movie. It's a guy that really specializes in these non-human
Yep.
characters and their sort of weird, idiosyncratic movements. Though the voice was done by David Hyde Pierce,
Um,
um, sort of
he
Darth
also
Vader type situation.
mm, he also plays an important character in the newest, not the newest, but I guess the second newest Star Trek series, Star Trek Discovery. He plays again an alien that looks suspiciously similar to Abe Sapien and sounds exactly the same because it's his voice. He's got a very unique voice, but yeah, he's I think if you want to talk about the effects some more, I don't even remember his name. The wind-up man, basically.
Carl Cronin?
Something like that. Hitler's head assassin. That's
Yeah.
another example of
That's a standout sequence. The it's not even an autopsy, isn't it? He's
yeah.
No.
he's captured at a certain point in the film, or he lets himself be captured. He's this weird clockwork man animated by like machine and black magic. It's not entirely clear, but it's super creepy. When he comes to life, he just wields these blades like a crazy assassin. Yeah, it looks like a character straight out of the Matrix, with his Daft Punk helmet too. But yeah, during the autopsy scene, you basically just see all this weird dissected flesh and wrinkled skin and surgical scars and the lips and eyelids being removed. It's a creepy image.
Like, why did he decide I don't want eyelids anymore or lips? What?
As the professor says, he had a surgical addiction.
But
like
you don't want to blink anymore?
Blinking's overrated.
Okay.
Every time you blink, that's like a millisecond of seeing things that you've lost.
Yeah, and you're more productive when you can't sleep.
I guess so.
I mean, I didn't think of that.
Like that dude is driven. Like you gotta respect him.
I mean, he was a very good assassin.
I'm just curious, like, how much of him interacting with the world was practical and how much what? I think a lot of it was practical. I'm very curious about, did they literally have him, like, for some of the scenes, did they have an actor, a stunt person, whatever, in a leather gimp suit that had extra, like, pockets added to the outside full of sand that they could pop? Because, like, that's the thing is he's his, like, anytime he gets shot, he literally, like, bleeds sand.
Poof. Yeah, like little sandbags being punctured. That was one of the tricks they used. They used some like green screen face type stuff because the eyes, his eyes are for the most part digital. Whenever you see them, so yeah, it's a combination of practical and digital effects, like a lot of the things in this movie. His actual body, I think, is a prop, and when it moves, it's either a puppet or a guy in a in like weird makeup and prosthetic effects. There's a really good special. This movie, when it came out on DVD, had a really good had some really good special effects on that, or sorry, special features on that DVD that go into a lot of this stuff and how they made that movie. Because a lot of the stuff with Samael, it's it's a dude in a rubber suit just flailing around, and then it transitions to these CGI models when you need it to defy gravity and cling to walls and ceilings. But yeah, I love seeing that kind of stuff. There's the fight in the train station, which is one of my favorite sequences in the movie, where Hellboy's going after the Hound. It's so good. But you see one scene where the Hound sort of gets up and starts flailing its like left tentacle at him, and you can tell it's just this flailing rubbery suit texture, and that always just makes me feel so warm and fuzzy.
I enjoy that creature as an actual character with personality in this movie is very interesting to me, because they make Samael interesting to me, because whatever, I don't know, I don't know if they're even gendered, because they I don't know,
reproduce,
but they reproduce asexually.
Yeah.
They just put eggs in. They just put eggs in whatever
I
they
mean,
stab.
whatever gender a strawberry is, I suppose, is the same that you have for Samael.
But I mean, if I want to like go down the rabbit hole, I could be convinced that if it weren't obsessed with eating humans or whatever it's obsessed with from an evil point of view, I could be convinced that Samael is a level of intelligence similar enough to humans to decide its own gender, much like humans can.
Well, and we certainly see intelligence. We certainly see a personality, which is hard to convey with a sort of goofy rubber
and
monster.
that's what I really like about it. That's why
Yeah.
I find it a very compelling
It
addition to the
gloats.
movie. Is the mix of like wolf-like, on all fours, very monster-like, just it is an animal behavior on top of like intelligent, standing on 2 feet, like okay, when it's in the subway the first time and it runs at the train, jumps up, slices through the door, rips it off, and runs through the train. That whole sequence was very clearly very thought out by an intelligent creature.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it behaves is like a human with arms and legs and hands and tools, and but other times it's acting like a dog, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a very fun creation, and it's one that they clearly enjoyed themselves in bringing to life. That's the general feel that I get with this movie, is that it was created with so much passion and love. Like the actors are taking their roles seriously. It isn't it doesn't have that same campiness that a lot of superhero movies of this era had. I mean, Catwoman, for God's sake, came out in the same year, and that was a notorious disaster.
Listen, that was a great movie.
It's great from like a schlock perspective. Like that movie, I can't stop laughing while watching. It is so enjoyable.
Very.
When did the original Daredevil movie come out? That's what I want to know.
Ooh, I think 2002, early 2000s.
2003. I just found it.
Yeah.
Good guess.
Yeah, this movie definitely has some overlap with those sorts, but this one takes itself seriously, and I think that's in its favor, even as how ridiculous things are going. And when you get to the climax with the giant space crystal tentacle monster, like you're still invested in the characters, you're still sort of invested in the world.
So let's go back a bit and resume sort of covering the story of what actually happens in the movie. So Rasputin's back. They raise Samael from the dead, whatever. We find out that Samael's laying eggs. They go on to try and find these eggs, and that's where some of the main characters, not some of the sort of semi-main, the side characters, die to the Clockwork Man, whatever. From there, the Clockwork Man shuts himself off, essentially. He unwinds his windings, and you think he's dead, and that's where we get the kind of autopsy, as Eric was alluding to. And that's an important plot point, because then later on, the bad guys come to, while Hellboy's out doing his cringy teenage spying on his girlfriend shit, the bad guys, Rasputin's creepy girlfriend, they show up at the Center for Paranormal Research and Defense. I think I got that right. And
yeah, Rasputin can just teleport in, and when he does that, he sort of brings back the Clockwork Man.
They bring back the Clockwork Man. They murder the professor, which is an important plot point. And that's what that is the result of that. Is that the one of the worst characters in this movie is now in charge, the head of the FBI.
I like Jeffrey Tambor's character. He's pretty unflappable, but he's also he's also quite obnoxious.
I mean, if we continue down the story, their goal is to stop Rasputin. They find out Rasputin and all of his bad guys are in this random cathedral in a random graveyard in the middle of Russia, I guess.
Yeah, and this is all to lead Hellboy there to fulfill their plans of what they plan to do at the beginning of the movie,
What
is bring these
the
sort of ancient evils into Earth and sort of destroy Earth.
the thing that really solidifies my opinion on that character, on the head of the FBI, is two things that happen. So they go like the entire time they're at this graveyard, and he's trying to do things by the book, whatever, we need a search grid, whatever. Hellboy just raises someone from the dead who's clearly been hung and only has half a, they bring back a skeleton to direct them. Whatever, they find their way into the cathedral, and the entire time, this head of the FBI is just like trying to prove he's the one with the big balls. He's the one that's in charge. It fails. Shortly after that, they get into a situation where him and Hellboy are separated from everyone else, and they're locked in a room with the Clockwork Man in a fight. And the thing that the juxtaposition that makes this character almost not make sense to me is Clockwork Man takes a swing at him with one of his swords, slices his jacket, and his response is like a dumbfounded, "What's wrong with you?" It's like, what do you mean what's wrong with him? He's been murdering people for the last 2 weeks. What, you're surprised that he tried to murder you after he murdered people multiple times? Do you not understand what's happening here? And then the juxtaposition of that to 35 seconds later, he's throwing gears at the guy trying to pick a fight to protect Hellboy. Like, he went from surprised, confused, and afraid to ready to get into a fight with the super clockwork assassin.
And that's why I love him so much.
Weird. It's just weird. I don't know.
He's a guy who has to be in control of everything, who acts like incredulously when people don't do what he wants them to do or what he expects them to do. And he's sort of in like a weird state of denial where he doesn't understand the danger. He's still trying to control everything. And I think it's absolutely hilarious. We get into more of his character in the second movie, but he's still the same way. But he definitely trusts and respects Hellboy's judgment a lot more.
By this point,
so
he
we
does
do get some character development.
Yeah, shortly after that, they spoiler, they kill the Clockwork Man, as you'd expect.
Spoiler! Wow.
Everyone's favorite character.
And then they go down the him teaching Hellboy how to properly smoke a cigar. and
see, character development.
And that's when they're friends now, sort of.
They have a grudging respect, I suppose.
I mean, why is it proper to get a match out and not a lighter?
Because when you burn a lighter, it gives off a lot more different gases and flavors, and depending on how efficient your lighter is burning, you'll actually get like lighter fluid on your cigar, and it will change the flavor. Whereas a match,
that sounds yummy.
I don't smoke anything, so it all sounds gross to me. But
it's something cigar enthusiasts are big into.
It's the same idea as like. It's the same idea as like people who are really into anything. Like, you don't want to drink soda out of a can; you want to drink it out of a glass bottle because it tastes better. Because the ones out of a can taste like aluminum or
wine glasses you always hold by the stem, that sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
Gotta let your wine aerate or put it through a decanter. You get, Yeah.
I mean, I guess, but okay, I get it now.
Also, it's easier to keep track of how many matches you have. When your Zippo, as we see in the movie, your Zippo might randomly run out. But if you've got a box of matches, you just know how many are in there, and when it's getting low, you buy a new one, I guess.
Quite right.
Yeah.
But that takes us to the climax of the film.
I was expecting you to go somewhere with that.
You know what? I was too, but then I just completely blanked on like all the names of the characters and the events, because everything just spirals into complete freaking madness. But it ties into like what happens at the end. Sort of ties into the sort of central theme of this movie, or at least one of them, is choosing your own path. Hellboy is always trying to do the right thing, follow his heart, and as immature as he is, he does a lot of good for these characters. And he's caught between two paths. He has two fathers, basically. Our Dr. Broom, and our Rasputin. Dr. Broom, who took him in and raised him, and Rasputin, who summoned him, called him forth. And at the end, he gets a choice whether or not to, sacrifice his girlfriend and save the world, or save his girlfriend and condemn the world. Follow those sort of two paths. And his destiny, as we find out, is to sort of be this harbinger for, the deity that Rasputin wants to bring to Earth. He's sort of like the gatekeeper, and he can sort of give in to that or resist it.
Like we get an important bit of iconology, a bit of imagery here, where John breaks free of his bindings. That's not the important bit, but he breaks free.
I keep forgetting about John.
Yeah, he breaks free of his
Luke Skywalker doesn't really have much.
He doesn't do it. He's not. This is the first time. So I'll before I get to my important imagery. That's the word I couldn't think of. Important imagery point. I'll go back a bit. This is the first time John does anything useful this movie. Like he's a little bit useful in like helping Liz a little bit with her problems and like being just like a normal, grounded, reasonable human in all of these situations to a degree. But really, this is the first time he does anything important, and the first time he shows, oh right, he did actually graduate from training at the FBI. He's not completely useless, and he breaks out of his shackle, knocks out Rasputin's creepy girlfriend that I can never. I don't know her name. She's not super important in this movie. And basically reminds Hellboy that even though, he may have been created for evil, he may be a literal, devil from the chaos universe, whatever. He was raised by a good man, and he can choose to be good based off of how he was raised, not based off of his origins, essentially.
Or whatever his destiny might be, yeah.
And in that, he throws a crucifix on a necklace to Hellboy, which Hellboy's father, the professor, always seemed to always carry a crucifix with him. It had some importance. It has some importance in warding off evil in this universe, I guess. And the crucifix literally burns a cross into Hellboy's hand, and I think that's the important. The sort
he
of
remembers who he is.
Yes, the imagery of almost branding him, despite the fact that he is created from evil, he has been branded with good by the father he was raised by.
That's well put. Yes,
is a little weird, and that's what saves the day, essentially.
Yeah.
And Hellboy just like beating people up, but
I mean, so what you're telling me is Christianity is the way to go.
Yeah.
In this universe,
has really strong Christian values.
It does.
Like when you get into it, this is a very, very pro-Jesus film. More so than Passion of the Christ, actually, which came out at the same time.
Oy vey.
But that's a conversation for another time.
That's basically Hellboy rips off his horns that have grown back due to evil, which closes the portal. The weird tentacle monster that was living within Rasputin breaks out. They sort of escape.
And we have to destroy a giant slimy tentacle monster, as you do.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So they kind of escape, and then Hellboy decides to go back with the grenades that the FBI have provided. Short fight scene, blows up the tentacle monster, nobody cares, blah, 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 it's dead.
Yeah, I was very disappointed in that fight scene. I felt like it should have been longer. There should have been a lot more tentacle slashing, in my opinion.
I feel like they didn't want the movie to be too long, and they spent too much time on weird teenage romance, so...
Yeah, this movie is oddly long. Just over 2 hours.
I like the I believe it's in this movie where like Liz has been killed by Rasputin, and then
Yes.
Hellboy basically tells the devil or whoever's on the other side of where you go when you die, "Hey, give her back, or I'm gonna come fucking kick your ass," and it somehow
Something like
works
that.
And it works.
Yeah.
because
I mean, what
he's
we see is
I
him
mean,
in her ear going,
yeah,
and
well,
then all of a sudden,
hey man, have you
she's
been
back.
on Twitch recently? It's just ASMR.
Is it?
It's just ASMR so good it brings her back to life. I guess I don't know.
Okay.
That's all he needed to do.
Ugh. I don't like any of the things I just said.
No, you're right.
No, yeah.
That's what this
He
movie's
just had to
about.
whisper. Yep. It should be called ASMR Boy.
It really, that's a very different movie.
This movie wishes it could be ASMR Boy.
I don't think so, but okay.
But yeah, the romance stuff is really what didn't hold up for me. And going back to rewatching it, there's a reason why I forgot about it, and reason why I forgot about the John Myers character. Thankfully, most of this stuff is really downplayed in the second movie,
Yes.
which I think is a universal improvement on this one. As much as I like this movie, especially for the time, does a lot of really cool stuff. Um, a lot of it doesn't feel like it holds up
I think there
in
was
like the story and the characters.
there's a little bit of crunchiness, a little bit of issues with some of the story in this. This movie feels, yeah, it does sort of feel like world building more than a full movie at times.
And the world
It's
building
fine.
stuff is like my favorite. I love all the little elements, like
Yeah.
when they're telling us more about Abe Sapien, when they're giving us a lore on Samael, and all the little details we see with Cronin, like his massacred body. It's some cool stuff. Like the world building is really what works for me. It just doesn't fully come together as a satisfying or interesting narrative.
Hmm.
Like the most interesting characters are the freak characters, the ones with the powers. It's not, John Myers, who is, the most forgettable character of all time.
I feel like, yeah, this movie, they concentrated on building the world more than actually telling a decent story. And then when you come to the second movie, they're like, "Cool, we built this world. Let's go play in it."
Exactly right. Like it's the second movie slows itself down in the right moments to give us really good character interactions. Like in this one, we don't really see much in the way of dialogue between like Abe and Hellboy, which is some of the most interesting things in the second movie. It's the character stuff. They really allow them to brush up against each other and respond to each other in the second movie, which is something that this one sort of lacked. But it is a fascinating world and a fun one to get some insight into. I can definitely see though how it can rub some people the wrong way if you're looking for like a neat narrative where everything makes sense. But nope, it's
Hmm.
just occult superpowers. And
Yep.
if you're not on board by the sequence, the 15-minute prologue in Scotland, then nothing else will interest you. So that'd be my recommendation if you're interested in this movie at all. Watch the first 15 minutes and see if you wanna continue on that ride. If it
Mhm.
does nothing for you, then you probably won't enjoy the rest.
Anything else, or is that
It
pretty
is a
much it?
PG-13 movie, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Is it?
I seem to remember this one being a little more R-rated, but a lot of the gore and blood effects are actually
Pretty tame.
pretty died down. It reminded me a bit of the first Spider-Man movie, which I think was also PG-13, but that one had some pretty crazy violence. Like Green Goblin gets stabbed in the pelvis by his own glider, which is a pretty horrific death. But yeah, I mean, between those two movies, there's some, some pretty horrific deaths for characters, but it's sort of kept PG-13, so it's nice to have a movie that can still be violent and horrific, but not R-rated.
Yeah, exactly. And they, on top of there's some, they keep the violence, the gore with the violence pretty toned down. They also keep the rest of the movie like, there's essentially no nudity. Not that there's an issue with that, but just if they're trying to keep the PG-13 rating, there's no nudity, there's very little cussing really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and which is weird because from what I remember, which my memory is really bad, I thought there was a lot of cussing in Hellboy. I remember him saying all the curse words, being the
Yeah.
worst superhero ever, but apparently not. My memory has served me pretty wrong.
I didn't remember his lines being that sort of corny and almost like his lines feel like they were written by a teenager, which
Yeah.
works and also
Works
kind
because
of
he
doesn't.
basically is a teenager.
I expected him to be a bit cleverer with his quips. I for some reason I had in my mind that they were like Deadpool level or
Yeah.
sort of Wolverine
Yes.
style quips at
Nope.
certain points, but no, it feels like they're coming out of the mouth of like a 13, 14-year-old. They're not particularly clever.
I mean,
Um
which is why we liked it back then, you
yeah,
would think,
yeah.
because they were so
I
they were
remember them
so
being cleverer.
yeah.
He is clever in the second movie, I think.
Yes.
So
From what I
that makes me
remember.
think it's kind of a product of the writing in this movie where things didn't fully gel.
Yeah, they still had some stuff to figure out, I guess.
Yeah. But what we do have is pretty good. I think this is a memorable movie that definitely deserves to sort of be watched, especially in the context of like nowadays we take for granted how big superhero movies are and how they seem to be like they're the biggest grossing movies of all time nowadays. The new
Mhm.
Spider-Man movie is like the fourth or fifth highest grossing movie ever, so we kind of take that for granted. But this was at a time where they were first actually reaching a broader audience. Critics actually got interested in them. More serious actors were taking these roles. Um, and yeah, and just for its blending of digital and practical effects, and the makeup effects are masterful. So if you're interested in it from that perspective, sort of see what kind of movies got the superhero engine rolling, this is definitely one of them. And it's not afraid to have a little darker tone or tell a more um, tell a story that isn't an origin story, because all the half the Marvel films are superhero origin stories, and
Mm.
this one sort of drops you sort of straight into the action of the character's life.
Yeah, I mean they tell him like I'm your dad kind of thing, but you don't know exactly how because he wasn't even like a baby when they found him. So he
Yeah,
learned some stuff from wherever he came from, the hell place, and we never know anything about that.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
just
The origin
there.
is wrapped up in 15 minutes. It's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where does this sort of stand up for you guys in terms of superhero movies?
That it's hard for me to like. It's almost hard for me to place it because up until basically now, or recently when we were talking about this movie and talking about doing the podcast, I never really considered it a superhero movie.
Same.
I get why. I understand, like, sort of, it does have a little bit of the superhero formula to it. It's based off of comic books, and he is a hero with powers that are super, I guess, if you want to put it that way. Like, he's he's but like, yeah. I mean, the easy answer is it's definitely better than Ant-Man because that movie was garbage.
Oh my
Um,
god.
yeah.
Well, just in terms of what you think is different or sort of unique about this movie, in terms of like how it was executed or the story.
It's this movie. You don't get the like every superhero movie ever. The climax is always a huge. Half the budget went into this fight scene. In this movie, you don't get that. This movie, like, you kind of do, like, you get the fight scene at the end between Hellboy and the big tentacle monster, but like, They
definitely do more grand climaxes in movies that would come later. Because a lot of those earlier Marvel films, especially like Iron Man, the big villain fight and the climax of the movie is kind of understated, like kind of a lot less crazy. And then, 15 years later when you get to Avengers Endgame, it's just the greatest cacophony known to man.
Yeah. Even you get to like Iron Man 3 is the one where he's got PTSD, I think. And like the end is just all the suits flying around and fighting, and
yeah, you got to go bigger.
It's bigger, and yeah, Thor Ragnarok, the climax, the battle's pretty big. Obviously, like you said, Infinity War and Endgame both have a pretty monstrous ending, and this movie is kind of like, yeah, there's a tentacle monster, he blew it up, the end.
Yeah, just he's dead now.
Yeah, it doesn't feel much like a clash of like titans, and the villain definitely seems a bit underdeveloped. You do have that sort of thematic two fathers kind of thing going on, but it's not particularly interesting or satisfying villain. Again, I always think of like, in the Sam Raimi, the first two Spider-Man movies, Green Goblin, Doc Ock, phenomenal villains, like phenomenally well acted and executed, and how they relate to the protagonist as being, especially brilliant. But here the villain doesn't really have much presence besides just teleporting in and having these like cool ass Doctor Strangelove glasses. But he is pretty forgettable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually forgot about him for a while, and then I was like, "Oh, that guy exists." Whenever he came back, I think
The
it was
script
with the
literally
puppet.
has him teleport in. Yeah.
Yes. I was like, "Oh, okay, that guy. Remember him?"
Yeah, like I always held this movie in like much higher esteem in my head. I still think it's pretty good, but it's now I think it's sort of middle,
Yeah,
slightly
so
above average.
I
Yeah.
guess to wrap it up, as we have done on a few of our episodes, how many Sheen beans do you give it, Eric?
Probably a 6.5 or a 7.
Lena?
Uh, I would say 5.
5?
5. It's
I
just
think
yeah, right in the middle.
like 5.5. 5.5.
I love the practical effects too much in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, the effects are really good.
That's what elevates it a little bit for me. But I definitely be more inclined to give it like a 5 for story and character execution for most of it. But yeah, I just think Ron Perlman's performance, Abe Sapien, John Hurt as Dr. Broom, like those elements, I think really elevate it, and it is memorable. Like parts of the movie, I think are super memorable and distinctive. I always remember the Clockwork Man, the Hound, Hellboy, Abe, Dr. Broom, but I always forget about the existence of John Myers. Like he just exits my mind as soon as I'm done with the movie. So it's a real mixed bag in that sense.
Okay, well, I think that's just about it for today. Thanks everybody for listening. I believe next episode coming out on February the 14th, we're going to be hopefully joined again by Selena and covering Jack Reacher, the movie Jack Reacher, starring Captain Scientology himself. And yeah, with that, we're gonna end, I guess.
Farewell.